So Psalm 77, again, page 577 in the Pew Bible is where it begins. And the heading says, "To the choir master, according to Jeduthun, a psalm of Asaph. I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. When I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints. You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old, the years long ago. I said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my spirit made a diligent search. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has a steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? Then I said, I will appeal to the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples. With your arm redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. When the waters saw you, O God, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. The clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth thunder. Your arrows flashed on every side. The crash of your thunder was in the whirlwind. Your lightnings lighted up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters. Yet your footprints were unseen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. Well, Brad, thank you for coming today. Welcome to the pulpit.
Well, I think it's every pastor's desire to have his congregation as excited about his sermon as the kids always are when they head off towards children's church. You know, they really show us the way we should be excited about hearing God's word and coming to worship. So thanks, Alex, for asking me to join you this morning, and it's a pleasure to be with you again. I was here in August filling in for Alex because he was away. So either he wanted to hear me actually preach, or I did okay enough so that people said, sure, bring him back, you know. So anyway, Psalm 77. The world we live in is a mess. And I mean way more than just the things that we face. Think about wars, poverty, thieves, scammers, evil governments, murder. It's way worse than what we normally think of day to day because we've got it pretty good. I actually stopped watching the news. I just felt like this is just not healthy for me to see all the time. Because what really sells is the bad stuff. I remember being with about 5,000 teenagers in a great celebration. Our denomination has that every 2 years. And I was thinking, I bet there's nobody in the news reporting that here's 5,000 teenagers sitting and doing good stuff. They were there for a week. They did work projects in the afternoon, and they're worshiping, and they're just, it's all good. That wasn't in the news. But boy, if there was one teenager who did something bad, that's going to make the news because that sells. But in the words of Peter in John chapter 6, Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God. Where can we go in the mess of this world other than to Jesus? It really is the only place to go with any kind of answer. I consider myself a realist. I think I have a pretty good balance of experiencing both the joys of this life and acknowledging the pain and the suffering and the struggle. I hope today, if you are a child of God, if you know Jesus, that you understand the available joy, the available blessing, and the available unbelievable peace, even in the midst of this messed up world. Philippians 4, one of my favorite verses. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. You're guarded. At least you can be. I sometimes think we wrongly present the Christian journey that we're on. Somehow when we talk to the non-believer or the ones that are searching or the ones that have the emptiness, we tell them how amazing it is to be a Christian. Now, I'm not saying it's not, and I'm not saying we shouldn't present that, but guess what? Is there anybody here that doesn't have some struggles in their journey today? I think we present it as just sort of this smooth, struggle-free, and somehow we think that Christians won't accept Jesus if they think that somehow it won't make everything great. And I think that's why so many people will seem to accept Jesus, but then they don't go on with it because they were expecting somehow that life would all become amazingly rosy. We live in a fallen world. This is a world where things just don't seem to work well. I drove up yesterday up to Portsmouth to meet with a guy, and my little car was just wasn't going well. And I thought, oh no, do I have transmission problems? And I got to my home and I checked the fluid. Oh, it's just down a quart. Obviously, I got a leak in the transmission. There's a problem. But I put a quart of transmission fluid in. She was beautiful driving over this morning. Things don't work in this world. Even just, middle of the night last night at 3 a.m., my daughter runs upstairs. Dad, there's a leak. There's water spraying everywhere. So I was up for about 45 minutes mopping up water in our downstairs. And fortunately, it was a part that I could just shut off and we still had water in the house. But things don't work the way they're supposed to. And we somehow think sometimes as Christians, isn't God supposed to protect us from leaks in the middle of the night and transmissions not working? We don't say it, but in the back of our mind is, well, I'm a Christian. Shouldn't God take care of me and protect me? Maybe we say it more like, well, why did that happen? Well, it happened because we live in a messed up, fallen world where things don't work. Why didn't God stop that? Have you ever found yourself thinking that? How come God didn't step in and fix that? Where was God when that happened? Those are some of the things we say that really reflect that somehow we think God is supposed to protect us from this world that we live in. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It's the stuff from the really tragic to the simple things of everyday life that frustrate us and make us angry. Or maybe some of the things like when the doctor's report wasn't what you expected. When you hear of someone dying suddenly, maybe somebody very young. I was in youth ministry for 25 years. I buried 3 teenagers. Or when the car breaks down, just when you're going someplace important. When someone says something that's really hurtful. When you're working hard and still struggling to pay the bills. When that class that you spent extra time preparing for just doesn't seem to go well, it just flops. What are we to do? How do we handle the ups and downs of life, and especially the downs? Because the ups are the times where we either A, forget God, or we're actually very thankful. Oh, thank you for that good thing. You're a good Father. Thank you. The downs are where we need to learn to look to God. One of the things I love about the Bible, it is the story of real people. There's nobody perfect in the Bible. I mean, even David, the man after God's own heart, look at, he's a murderer, he's an adulterer. God didn't choose us just to give us lives that are perfect, because that doesn't exist. There are no fairy tales here. I have a favorite psalm. It's Psalm 77. We're looking at it today. I would encourage you to have a favorite passage of Scripture. That's the first place you go to. You're struggling. You know you're feeling discouraged. You know things are going bad. It's an extra bad day. Go to that Scripture. That's my Psalm 77. It's a real life psalm. It gives the struggles, and it gives a solution of sorts, how to walk through life. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at Psalm 77, almost verse by verse, just sort of a walkthrough of what the psalm is saying. I don't normally alliterate my sections, but this all just started falling into place with A's. So look for the A's. The first one, verses 1 through 6, the agony. Some of you may be old enough to remember the agony of defeat, ABC Sports, and it shows all these people fallen, and this is the agony. I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. When I remember God, I moan. I meditate. My spirit faints. Selah. You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old, years of long ago. I said, let me remember the songs in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. And then my spirit made a diligent search. Verse 1. It's literally my voice to God, and it says it twice. I cry aloud to God, my voice to God. There's an emphasis there. You know what? This is what we're supposed to do. I like this psalmist right away. I cry out to God. He's going to the right place. This is a good thing. He's even convinced God hears him. I cry out to God, aloud to God, and he will hear me. There's no question there. There's no doubt. And I hope he hears me. He hears me. So I like this guy already. Verse 2, day of trouble, distress. I seek the Lord in my day of trouble. Wow, this guy is really, really good. I wish I could do that in some of my days of trouble. The older I get, the more I seem to have sleepless nights. The more troubles I have, or the more things that run through my mind, the more things that, maybe it's just plain old age, I don't know. But I have sleepless nights, and this guy's got a sleepless night. His soul refuses to be comforted. In the middle of the night, he's stretching out his hand. Now, that's the first surprise that you should have. He's gone to God. He knows God's going to hear him. It's the middle of the night. He's stressed. He's going to God. And his soul refuses to be comforted. Wait a minute. Isn't God the God of all comfort? How come? See, you should be intrigued with Scripture. How come his soul refuses to be comforted? In fact, look at verse 3. When I remember God, I moan. Oh, wait a minute. When I remember God, I'm supposed to praise. I'm supposed to rejoice. We did that this morning. How come when I remember God, I moan? When I meditate, my spirit faints. And don't overlook that little word, Selah. They think it's a musical term. They're not 100% sure. But they think it's a term that kind of means pause. So you pause for a minute and you say, well, wait a minute. This guy is going to God and he's not comforted right away. You know what? Has that ever happened to you? Yeah, it's happened to me. I'm thinking, again, I want to meet this guy when I get to heaven. I like this psalmist because he's doing the right stuff and I can relate with him because sometimes God doesn't, just because I go to him, oh yes, here it is, my child, I'll take all the problems away. I will comfort you. In fact, verse 4, you hold my eyelids open. Who's keeping him awake? God is. God has got something he wants to say. God is the one that is bringing about this situation. I don't know this guy's stress. I don't know his trouble. I don't know what he's going through, but I relate with him. And our own troubles always feel huge, don't they? Haven't you ever told somebody something about that you're struggling with and they go, what are you bothered by that for? That's not bad. You know what? If it's to me, it is bad. It always is. I don't care how big you think it is. You tell me your troubles and I'll think, that's easy. No. So he's going through a lot. I mean, think Job here. Think Job. All right. Chapter 1 in Job. Now there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabeans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. And while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. And while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone escaped to tell them. And while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the oldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house. It fell upon the young people, and they are dead, and I alone escaped to tell you. I haven't had a day like that. That's the ultimate bad day. That's what I think the psalmist is kind of going through. He remembers and he moans about God. This should be us. We weren't made for this world. This should be us that are thinking and pausing and saying, in the midst of the struggle that this world has, I'm going to go to you. And I think this is the agony. In a few minutes, we're going to look at the answer. We're not made for this world. Have you ever thought about that? I'm a mechanic. I like to work on my own vehicles. And I also worked at Sears for a long time. Sears Craftsman Tools. You know, everything I have is a Craftsman. They're guaranteed for life. Well, when I worked at Sears, the customer was always right. And they would come in with screwdrivers that looked like this. You know, and I had to take it back as a return and give them a brand new one. That was the company policy. But I always had a little bit of fun. Well, that must have been some screw. You know, have you ever tried driving in a nail with a screwdriver? Doesn't work. How come? Because the screwdriver wasn't made to drive in the nail. You're not made for this world. You're made for the Garden of Eden. You're made to walk in the cool of the day with the Lord right beside you and having a conversation with him. That's what you're made for. So when you question what you're facing or you feel burdened by this world, you should. Frankly, I think that's about the most healthy thing you can do, is admit there's a huge burden in this world, and God is the only one that gives us the answer. Like Peter, where do we go? Where else can we go? You name me one thing that really has the answer other than Jesus. Trouble brings stress and depression and moaning. God is the one keeping him awake. He's at the point where he can't even speak. I know some people that'd be like a miracle. Stop talking and be still and know that I'm God. That's what this guy's doing. And he's beginning to think about the years of old, past years, what God has done. Given the context, I think we could say God is prompting his thinking. I mean, if God's the one that's kept him awake, God hasn't done that just to be mean. He's not saying, oh, I'm going to keep Brad awake tonight. He's going to prompt what's going on in my mind. And verse 6, song in the night. These songs that allow worship and sleep, let me meditate in my heart and diligently search. Okay, there's the transition. He's in the agony. He's gone to God. God is beginning his new thinking. What happens when we meditate? Now, I hope you know meditation is not emptying your mind. You empty your mind and it'll be filled with all kinds of stuff. It's focusing and thinking about God. And in this case, he's thinking, what has he done? I'm going to do a diligent search. You each have a story. You each have a story that if your eyes are open, you can see, well, God met me there, and God met me there, and God met me there. In my life, right away, the 3 darkest days of my life are when I know God met me in a way that none in my 70 years do I think of as God meeting me so much in those 3 dark days. Those are the days 50-some years ago he led me into ministry. Changed the course of my life. Listen to the questions the psalmist begins to ask. They're good questions. Questioning God, if you're doing it with the right heart, is not wrong. We got Jeremiah as an example of all the questions. We can look at Gideon. The whole Gideon's fleece is the thing of Gideon just saying, God, help me, show me. Asking and questioning God is not wrong. Here are the questions the psalmist asks. This is the assurance. We had the agony. This is the assurance that the psalmist here is really grabbing hold of. Verses 7 to 10. Excuse me. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? Selah. Think about those questions. Or think about the questions you have in your heart. There is an answer. There's an answer to all these questions. And God's not insulted by questioning them. This psalmist is at the brink of the edge. He's about ready to break. And so he's just saying, well, wait a minute. Does God spurn forever? Does he snub? Does he forget the purpose? Does our trouble mean God has rejected us, even if we feel that way? Is that the God that we know that he rejects? If God is love, can he reject? Can he scorn? Can he turn away from us? Actually, it says, has his chesed, his steadfast love. Every time I read Scripture, when I'm in the Old Testament and I would come across steadfast love, I always translate in my mind, and actually I usually try to say it, chesed. It's Hesed in the English spelling, but for Hebrew, you got to get the kind of, almost want to spit, chesed. And there's no English translation for it. It's translated as steadfast love, loving kindness. It's got several, God's faithfulness, the covenant-making love. It's a love so solid and promised by God himself that it cannot change. Our love changes. You know, you love somebody and they do a couple things bad to you. You don't love them anymore, or at least for a while. God's love is not like that. It's chesed, it's steadfast love. And does his loving kindness cease? Does God stop loving? Of course not. Can God stop being gracious? Verse 9. Has God forgotten to be gracious? Does God forget? Of course not. Has he in anger shut up his compassion towards me? Think about it, Selah. You see, the psalmist asks all these great questions, and the answer is, of course not. That's not the God I know. That's not the God of the Bible. That's not everything that God has taught me. God is not some superhuman person. He's not the best of the superheroes. He's beyond what we ask or think. He's infinite in all ways. He's unchanging in his love and his commitment towards us. We were singing this morning that God's love is brighter than the sun. I never thought about that before. I mean, we're 93 million miles away from the sun, and it gives us the light of day, and God's love is brighter than that. Whoa. He's going through a process here, this psalmist. It's a logical process. He's thinking through his past. And then, here's again sort of a transition we'll get to. Verse 10, then I said, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most God. My 3 dark days, I can remember saying, God, I've been with you. I've walked with you. I will stay with you. I was only about 20 then. I look back on that and I said, whoa, where did I get all that maturity? Because it didn't come from me. The answer is dawning. Can you hear it in what the psalmist says here? I will appeal to this. That's the first little measure of hope. You see, if we handle these things the right way, God is ready to give us the hope and the comfort. He's ready. But he doesn't just dish it out. It'd be like your kids just saying, I want candy. Here's the candy. We don't do that kind of thing even as humans. How do we expect God to do that? The answer is beginning to dawn on him. Again, think of Job. Then Job arose and tore his robes and shaved his head and fell on the ground and he worshipped. He worshipped. He went to church after this terrible, horrible day. Of course, you don't have to go to church to worship, do you? In fact, I was thinking as Alex was talking, when you get to heaven, it's going to be worship, but don't think of it as like, a church service. Because sometimes pastors say this quietly in their office. Sometimes church services are boring. It's not going to be that way in heaven. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. You heard the agony. You've heard his assurance. Now let's look at his answer. Verses 11 to 15. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. You see where he goes to? He's come from the agony, how terrible things are. I don't have any comfort. He said, well, wait a minute. Yeah, but that's not the God that I know. I will trust God. I will look to God. And in fact, I'm going to start thinking about all the stuff that God has done for me. And that's a pretty long list, if we're honest. I mean, my guess is there's none of you that slept on the streets this morning. You may have. I don't know you. But you probably had breakfast. You probably had something. There's bread out there for you to take home if you want. Thanks, Panera. You're doing okay. Ponder all the ways that God has blessed you. I did this several years ago, and every once in a while I just go back and I just read the big long list of all the ways God has blessed me. I will ponder all your works. I will remember. I will meditate. Remember what he's done, all the wonders of old, all the work, all the mighty deeds. We are so forgetful. You're going to have a communion later on in the service, I believe. Okay? You know what the biggest thing is for communion? To remember, because we're so forgetful. To remember what God has done. To remind us regularly. He died for us. He gave his life for us. Remember in my life the 3 worst days? I didn't tell you about them, but I see now the direction that God took me, the ways in which he's used me, the family that I now have, my wife, my 4 children, my 7 grandchildren. That's all because of those 3 dark days. Remember God's faithfulness? Think about what he's done. What's your favorite memory of sensing God's presence? For me, I can tell you at Camp Spofford, our district camp, I was on the beach. You were away from all the bright lights, and I looked up and saw the stars, and I felt this big. Who am I to question God? That was the closest moment that I've ever had with God. Verse 13. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? What God is great like our God? This is the climax of the psalm. Okay, you get the build up, you get the problems, and this is the climax. This is the point where the psalmist says, you know what? It doesn't matter what I'm struggling with. What God is like my God? Your way seems like I'm in the midst of the darkness right now, but it's not gonna be, because God is holy. I'm going to read kind of a lengthy passage out of Isaiah 40 that strikes me as kind of a response to the psalmist saying, your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? Here's Isaiah 40. Behold, the Lord God comes with might, and his arm rules for him. His reward is with him, and his recompense before him. He will tend his flock like a sheep, like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms. He will carry them in his bosom and gently lead them that are with young. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand and marked off the heavens with a span, enclosed the dust of the earth in a measure and weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance? Who has measured the Spirit of the Lord? Or what man shows him his counsel? Whom did he consult? And who made him understand? Who taught him the path of justice and taught him knowledge and showed him the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are like a drop from a bucket, and who are accounted as the dust on the scales. Behold, he takes up the coastlines like fine dust. All the nations are nothing before him. They are accounted by him as less than nothing and emptiness. To whom then will you liken God? Or what likeness compare for him? Do you not know? Do you not hear? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. Who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them like a tent to dwell in? Who brings princes to nothing and makes the rulers of the earth as emptiness? Scarcely are they planted, scarcely sown, scarcely has their stem taken root in the earth when he blows on them and they wither. The tempests carry them off like stubble. To whom then will you compare me, that you should be like him, says the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high and see who created these. He who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name, by the greatness of his might. And because he is strong in power, not one is missing. Excuse me again. Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord? Does that sound familiar to the psalmist? My right is disregarded by my God. No, that's not what the psalmist said. This is a different thought. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has not met no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. Here's how a psalmist applies that. You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples. Verse 15. With your arm, you with your arm redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. Selah. We could name biblical wonders, and the psalmist does, but aren't there many in your own life to look at and remember? My fourth A is verses 16 to 20. We'll just look at real quickly. The psalmist thinks of the stories told to him in his childhood. These are the analogies. They're really illustrations, but that doesn't begin with A. Verse 16. When the waters you saw, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. This is a reference to creation. You know, I'll throw this in again. I don't know where you were at, but when we grab hold of evolution, we take away from God the power of creation. The Old Testament people constantly refer to creation as a reflection of the power of God. And so evolution just steals that away. Verses 17 and 18, the clouds poured out water, the skies gave forth thunder, your arrows flashed on every side, the crash of your thunder was in the whirlwind, your lightning lights up the world, the earth trembled and shook. So we have the waters trembling, creation. These verses seem to be like referencing to the flood and just the power of God to just destroy everything. And verses 19 to 20 are his thoughts on the Red Sea passing through the Red Sea. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters, yet your footprint was unseen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. He quickly just reflects upon ways that he has seen God at work. That's what you and I need to do. Turning to God in times of exhaustion, maybe like right now. Again, I don't know where you are politically, but it's just, we are just in turmoil as a country. There's just such division. And you can't seem to have good conversations. You can't talk about it. You have to keep it to yourself almost. I know of homes where you can't even talk about it within the home. My neighbor, I was having a conversation with him, and I know he kind of agrees with me politically, but he said, "Oh, it's so good to talk to you. I have to be quiet in my own house. Can't talk about this." Division in his own house. When you question what is going on, when life seems to be unhinged, remember what God is like our God. It seems like what we want offered to us is the removal of the trial, removal of the mess. We live in the midst of that. And it's not God's normal way of acting to pull away the bad health, to take away the sickness, to fix the things that are the mess of this world. It seems to me that one of the greatest things that God offers in the midst of this mess, the world that is filled with this lack of peace. To me, peace is the biggest thing we can get from God in the midst of the everyday struggle that we all face. Philippians 4:7, I mentioned this at the beginning. And the peace of God, which surpasses your understanding. The peace of God is more than what you can grab. You can't understand the peace of God. It surpasses all understanding. It guards your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Look to find that peace in the midst of this mess, and then see what God does, because it's amazing how many people will come to you and say, "Wow, you just seem so different. How come you're so at peace?" Sometimes we fight to look for opportunities to share about Jesus. Sometimes it's just a matter of us living the Christian life the way He wants us to, and people will come flocking to us. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Let's pray. Lord, we want to be your children that live successfully in ways that honor you. And so we want to be strong, but we want to be strong in the ways you want us to be strong. Trusting you, looking to you, remembering what you've done. In the midst of the agony that we all face, help us to realize that you are the only answer, and you're the only one that offers peace in the midst of the storm. Help us to follow you, trust you, learn more and more to love you, and then, Lord, to pass that on as people talk with us, as we talk with others about what you offer in the midst of this fallen world. We praise you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own Son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? So as Pastor Brad was sharing, we look back, we remember what God's done for us. If he gave his Son for us, we can trust him with the rest, right? So go in peace. Amen.